Fantasy Championship Week starts, sits, and streamers. I've come up with 6 categories to find the best plays for your Week 17 matchups. We get the boom bust play of the week. We get the player with the best matchup of the week. We get the player you cannot start under any circumstances of the week. My favorite streaming option of the week, the rookie of the week, and the game breaker. We'll start with the boom bust play, and that's Jauan Jennings. It's been a disappointing few weeks for Jauan Jennings, but we've seen the boom weeks from him several times this season. He was the wide receiver 1 in week 3, the wide receiver 7 in week 11. He was the wide receiver 6 in week 14. He's been targeted 8 or more times in 5 of his last 7 games, and there should be plenty of passing volume to go around in week 17. The 49ers are playing the Lions on Monday Night Football. The Lions offense scores a bunch of points, which means the 49ers are going to have to throw to keep up with them. And the Lions will likely get out to an early lead, which will only help fuel the passing game for San Francisco as they work from comeback mode. And Vegas agrees that it's going to be a shootout. 49ers-Lions is the highest point total on the week and the only one projected to go over 50 points. We want fantasy players from that game environment. The Lions are the 6th easiest matchup for wide receivers according to adjusted fantasy points allowed, and we know how decimated their defense is with injuries right now. The running game looked dead last week with the 49ers on their 5th string running back, and the Lions have been strong against the run for most of the season. This is the week to go back to Jauan Jennings and trust that he's going to give you that boom performance to lock up your championship on Monday Night Football. And the best matchup of the week, that is Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving is shaping up to be a league winner. He looked recovered from his back and hip injuries last week against the Cowboys. He played 57% of the snaps. He rushed 16 times for 68 yards and a touchdown. He also caught all 3 of his targets. He was the RB16 on the week. In fact, in his 4 healthy games since the bye week, Bucky Irving is averaging 136 yards from scrimmage and 21.5 fantasy points per game. On the year, he's 6th in true yards per carry, number 6 in yards per touch, number 7 in evaded tackles per touch, 3rd in yards created per touch, and he's 8th in runs of 15 yards more, and that's according to playerprofiler.com. The matchup this week, they are home against the Panthers. The Panthers are the number 1 easiest matchup for running backs. James Conner was going off against the Panthers last week before his injury. He had 166 total yards and a touchdown while playing just 45% of the snaps. Before that, it was Rico Dowdle who ran for 149 yards in week 15. In fact, the Panthers, they had allowed a running back to reach 120 rushing yards in 3 straight games prior to week 16 and 5 of the previous 6. And that included Bucky Irving, who did it when these teams played against each other in week 13. He ran 25 times in that game for 152 yards and a touchdown. He also caught all 3 of his targets for 33 yards, and he finished as the RB1 overall that week with 27.5 fantasy points. Fire up Bucky Irving. He is going to help you win your championship in week 17. On the other side, we don't want to touch Jerry Jeudy. He's going to be on your bench no matter what. You cannot play Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy got you to the playoffs. I understand that. But he is going to cost you a championship if you try to roll him out week 17. Last week's dud, that was not a fluke. That was actually the difference between the Jameis Winston show and the Dorian Thompson-Robinson disaster. DTR only targeted Jerry Jeudy on 3 of his 34 pass attempts, and that resulted in 2 catches for 20 yards for Jerry Jeudy. DTR is just a bad quarterback who the coaches do not trust to drop back 40-plus times like they did with Jameis Winston. He doesn't push the ball down the field at all. In fact, he has 2 career completions of more than 20 yards on 180 pass attempts. That's even before we factor in that the Dolphins have been one of the top 12 matchups for wide receivers this season, or one of the top 12 toughest matchups for wide receivers this season. I am not trusting Jerry Jeudy anywhere near my starting lineup with a championship on the line. Thank you for your service, but I'll find another option for this week. And speaking of finding other options, you could go to the waiver wire and you might still be able to find Chig Okonkwo. He is the streamer of the week. I talked about Chig Okonkwo as one of the top sleepers on last week's Sleepers and Streamers show. And that paid off in such a huge way. He was targeted 11 times. He got 9 for 81 yards. He didn't score a touchdown, but it was still enough to finish as the tight end 2 overall on the week, and that was not a fluke performance. Chig Okonkwo has been coming on strong late in the year. He has 31 targets over the last 4 weeks, 21 over the previous 2, and that includes a 10-target performance in week 15 where he caught 8 for 59 yards. He's a big play receiver. He's got 4.5 speed, 245 pounds. We saw that come into play in week 12 when he took a pass 70 yards for a touchdown. This is a tight end, almost 250 pounds, going 70 yards for a touchdown. He's a freak athlete, big time, big playmaker. He has 4 top 10 finishes this year, including 3 inside the top 6. Remember, Chig Okonkwo was being hyped as like the next big breakout tight end just last offseason after he finished his rookie season strong. Now, this week, he's got the matchup against the Jaguars. The Jaguars secondary has been torched by the pass all season long, and specifically against tight ends, they rank as the 7th easiest matchup for the position. It's not going to be, the high-scoring game that the Titans have been in over the last 2 weeks, so the passing volume could be down a little bit, but Chig Okonkwo can still be trusted as a tight end streamer in Week 17. He's clearly a top target in the passing game and should be good for about 7 to 10 targets, 8 to 12 PPR points, and we've seen the ceiling when everything clicks into place. You can trust Chig Okonkwo if you need a streamer tight end in Week 17. Now, the rookie of the week, that's going to be Bo Nix. Bo Nix has been one of the top streaming quarterbacks all season long. He's exceeded every expectation imaginable, and he's currently sitting as the QB9 in fantasy points per game. However, he has been outside the top 12 in 3 straight weeks. He was the QB 26 against the Browns, QB 14 against the Colts. He was the QB 15 against the Chargers. But this is the week that Bo Nix bounces back in a big way. They're going on the road against the Bengals. The Bengals have a great offense and a terrible defense. That is the formula for a shootout and a fantasy points party. The Broncos will need to air it out to keep up with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase and company, and they're likely going to be playing from behind as well. So we're going to get a ton of Bo Nix dropbacks, which is going to result in more passing yards, touchdowns, and scrambles as well. Bo Nix has some wheels. He takes advantage of that. We could see that several times in this game. The Bengals are the 5th easiest matchup for the quarterback position this season. I think Bo Nix takes advantage, and he finishes fantasy championship week as a top 10 quarterback. Now, the game breaker of the week, this is the player that is going to go off in Week 17, and that is George Kittle. George Kittle is on a heater right now. He's tight end 1 overall in fantasy points per game and top 3 among tight ends in receiving yards, red zone targets, receiving touchdowns, and yards after the catch. He's also number 1 in yards per route, yards per target, and yards per reception. He has scored as a top 5 tight end 8 times this season. He's only finished outside the top 12 once, and that was in that snow game against the Bills. He is the absolute focal point of the offense, and now he gets a smash spot against a decimated Lions defense. The 49ers are going to be throwing to keep up with the Lions offense, especially now that the 49ers run game is pretty much all but dead, with Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, and Isaac Guerrero all out for this game. George Kittle has gone over 100 receiving yards in 2 of the last 3 weeks, and outside of that snow game, he hasn't been below 50 receiving yards all the way back in week 4. I know you don't need me to tell you that you can play George Kittle in week 17, but if you have him in your lineup this week, you should feel really good about your chances of taking home that title.